And we can we'll just give folks a couple of seconds just to see. We've got a couple of attendees, Jen Holmgren, as well as Susan Hoag. And if you want, I will read the preamble. So this is the June 23rd meeting of the Clean Energy Commission. It's 5:32 p.m. and we have a new preamble. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law pursuant to section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. Additionally, all votes will taken by the Clean Energy Commission during this and future remote meetings will be by roll call vote. If there is public comment, if you're calling on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. And if you're watching from a computer or device, there's a raise hand button that you can tap to request to speak. So I turn it over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Greg. So I will call the meeting to order. This is the Clean Energy Commission's meeting of Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. And it looks as though we have a pretty good representation of our group, even if we can't see all the faces. So thank you all for being here. First question is, do we have any meeting minutes to approve at this point, or should we pass over that until the next meeting? Anybody?
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Linda. Yeah, there are a whole list of meetings to approve. The November 2019, January 2020, February 2020, and March 10th, 2021. I did not issue March 31st, 2021. The only party that's gotten back to me on any of the minutes I just listed was Linda Brayton. Linda was fine with all except for the ones from February 2020, because that discusses the strategic plan and the fact that names are in there for assignments under the strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so obviously 3 sets of these minutes are over a year old. I don't know how you want to proceed with these.
If nobody objects, how do people feel about approving the 2019 and the 2020 sets today? And then moving on to the 2021s at the next meeting?
Okay, except that, like I noted, Linda Brayton did have some questions about the strategic plan information. And, you know, at this point, it's become, you know, kind of a moot issue as far as the strategic plan goes, because we're not really following that anymore. It may need to just be dusted off and redone in an abbreviated form. But her primary issue was the fact that there were names in there. I can pull out the names and we can go forward with that and get them approved.
I'd suggest we do that.
Yep, me too.
Even simpler than that, and I really would prefer it, is that if we took the actual plan out and simply made reference to the fact that the final document is on the Clean Energy webpage. And that way there won't be any.
That's fine.
That's
with me.
fine too.
And that makes it very simple.
Let's go with Linda Brayton's suggestion and move on.
Okay, so we need a roll call vote to approve 3 sets of minutes with.
I agree with that.
Revisions mentioned. They are the November 2019, January and February of 2020 minutes. Could I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve them.
Thank you. Second?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I'll start with Linda Saunders. She's in my upper left corner. How do you vote?
I approve them. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I too approve them. Linda Brayton.
Aye.
Deborah Darby. Deborah, are you?
Yes.
Yes.
Approved.
John?
Aye.
Approved.
And Gemma, you're not a member, so you don't vote. Okay, so the minutes are approved by unanimous vote, those 2019 and 2020 sets. And we'll proceed to the March 10th and March 31st of 2021 at our next meeting.
Okay, the March
Candace, if-
10th were
just 1 second.
circulated.
Sure.
Candace, Sam is also on, but
Oh.
his video was not working.
Oops.
I didn't chime
Sorry.
in. I'm here. I approve them as well, even though. you
Okay,
picked
there we
my-
go.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Sam.
No, I should have chimed in, but I just.
Out of sight, out of mind, I guess. All right. And does anybody have any conference or meeting information that they would like to share with the board before we go on to Greg's report? And that sounds like silence. Greg?
I could say one thing, and I'll do it in
Okay.
sentences, that I did attend a Resilience Hubs webinar from the Clean Energy Group, I think it was last week. And I can send around the link or whatever. It was interesting. It was, in my own mind anyway, it connected me with the concept of microgrids. And it was a focus on neighborhoods and how to build organically. And that's enough to say.
It was interesting. I watched that as
Oh,
well.
did you? Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah, good.
Good evening, Mayor. I see you have joined us.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be quick and brief, and it's the same word, but I'll be, I was going to say I'm never quick. But first of all, I want to thank Gemma. It's great having you aboard. Everyone's excited. And Greg, like I said, you know what, he never, previously we joking around, he asked for a raise, he did not. We were just joking, he deserves more because, it's kind of hard during pandemic to keep doing all these resilience and coastal resilience and going on the climate change and doing other things. It was easier for me to actually educate myself because the fact is there were so many Zooms that I could actually educate and have to go from one building to another. And I am on the MMA for Mayor's climate change committee, and we try to pass the House and the bill and the governor to get on board on some of the stuff. And then I go on webinars, and then I'm going to have to really publicly thank Valerie Nelson and Damon Cummins, because I emailed them about everything like they have to do with climate. Where do we go? Should we support this? And Mayor, the Manchester's doing this, let's support them on this one, we need to do this one. So they've been really great. But I want to ask any here, you can privately email me after. I need a liaison. I cannot depend on Jenna. I can, but it's not fair because I already sent her so many different emails, or Greg, because we're doing so many different things. I really would like someone to always go on in case I can't make it, the MMA one. That's very important. That's when we can get money to do things for climate change. We can do things to make green. We can actually see what bill that we need to support. There were so many things I didn't even realize that was going into different waters. I checked, ours is not. The chemicals and other things that they say that are good for you, that it's not. All of these things that they say is biodegradable, that it's really not. And it's just so profound how, nobody knows, because no one's, not that they don't care, that there's so many things happening that you don't realize, like a simple thing of one of the things they might be using, a pellet or whatever, is not biodegradable. So I really need some help. And I know your hands are all full and you guys are doing, this commission is doing great work. But if someone would like to be our liaison, and I don't know if it's Candace, but, I'll send this stuff over to you and say, can you go to this meeting? Or someone, can you go to this one? I want to make sure that we have every opportunity to grab any kind of funding, anything we need to do. And because now we need to, and it's no offense to everyone, I'm not saying that, my house is perfect or anyone's house is perfect, but, we have done a lot of work, the cater, the Pond Road, the EV charging stations, the city hall, the lights. I mean, we have, but they can be, we need to do, however, an action plan, which also assesses greenhouse gas emissions, homeowners, businesses, transportation, everyone says this to, the green bus, that's going to take a lot of time and funding. And if there's funding out there, because I can't go to a meeting or we can't get Greg or Gemma on all of the same meetings and we lose out, that's not fair for the city of Gloucester. So would any of you email me and say, Mayor, yeah, hook me up. I'll be more than happy to relay back. You won't be able to vote, but you can hook up all the information. I can get on the phone and Greg or I and ask them what we need to do to get grants or whatever. I just want to make sure that we are representing every little thing we can. We can't say it's our future, but it's my grandchildren's and it's your children's and it's their future. And if we don't do something now, well, I don't want to go into that because you know better than I do. I'm just learning.
We all agree with you there, Madam Mayor, and I urge all members to take advantage of this opportunity to work with the mayor. And if you're interested in being a liaison to the MMA, please do email her.
MMA or any other ones I might have, I'll send them
Right.
to you and you can pick and choose. I mean, I can send them to the group and say, look, I can't do that one, but I can. We
Mhm.
need to have a representation at least all the time, honestly, because I think this is the time that we know with Biden and climate and everything else, this is the time that we can start looking at the grants and looking what we need to do and look at, we've given tips to businesses. Well, let's find a green initiative to give to them too. Let's do both. So before someone wants to come to Gloucester and build, a new business or renovate, let's look at some of the green stuff that we can offer. Because Greg's great at that and he's doing that. And Gemma's going to be helping 100% right behind. But how many are we losing out because we're focusing on one project right now? There's too many out there. We're all going for the same thing, the whole Massachusetts. So we need representation. And I'm telling people who already know and agree. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
listening to
everybody.
me. Sorry for interrupting, but it was really important.
It is important, and I'm glad you did. Now, Greg, are you ready to update us on some of the wonderful stuff that has been going on in community development?
Sure.
And
I'm just
Gemma
gonna-
as well, chime in
Yep.
whenever you.
Just going to share my screen. So this is just, similar format with some updates on some projects that we had talked about probably back in March that were kind of in the pipeline, and some of the results that we've seen, which are pretty exciting on a couple of fronts. Here. So I was going to cover an update on municipal aggregation, and then demand response, which I think we've spoken about a little bit, and we've moved forward with Public Works on that initiative as well. Talk a little bit about the application that we put in for the climate adaptation and resilience plan. And Gemma did a lot of work on that, so I'll hand that off to her to speak about. And then what we are looking towards for Green Communities program participation and reporting and potential upcoming projects. And we've really have a excellent municipal representative at National Grid, Lori Timmerman, who we've been working with on a couple of these efforts as well. And really, trying to do the planning now for those potential projects that will likely, move into a fall grant round with the Green Communities program. So on June 2nd, we had was the bid date for the next municipal aggregation. And so we had representation from the city and Good Energy, who had successfully received 4 bids for the next potential 3-year, 37, 39-month potential contract. And these are the results. So of the 4 bids, the lowest bid was submitted by Constellation Energy. So we also had 3 of the other major energy suppliers in the running. And so, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the current program, which expires on December, at the end of December of this year, had a local green 5% rate of around 11 cents and change. The 100% option was around 13 cents. And then the basic rate, without having any additional renewable energy, was just under 11 cents. And, again, they thought from the indicative pricing that we were going to be in a good position to put out the bid at this point. And we've actually received a winning bid that is lower than the current program. So the local green 5%, which we had discussed at the last Clean Energy Commission meeting, of staying with the 5% adder above and beyond what is required by the Commonwealth, will come in at just under 11 cents at 10.0889. There's a bit of movement in the REC market. The RECs are actually more expensive right now. And so the RECs will again be supplied by Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And so if you were to use the 100% option, that actually ratchets up to 14.356 cents per kilowatt. So it's going to be a little bit pricier, but I think the folks that we can see from the number of accounts that have participated in the current program and the fairly static level of folks that have remained at 100% green, it's a principle thing. This is a little bit of an increase, but hopefully we have continued participation of folks that are looking to have all of their energy in some way supporting renewable energy. And then the basic rate again drops just slightly by a couple thousandths of a penny. I'm sorry, down to 10.07. So, and I also just to be consistent with the messaging and the requirements from the Department of Public Utilities, that we have to continually identify that the products described as green contain renewable energy certificates above the amount required by the Commonwealth and come only from solar, wind, and anaerobic digestion and low impact hydro located within New England. And that's the other part of being able to refer to it as local, that those sources would be from local renewable projects. So this is all really good news. The other notation here is that the current program participants will seamlessly transition into the new program. There's no action that's required by them to take, but obviously, as we move forward, we will be working with Good Energy to update the information on the standalone Gloucester Community Electrical Aggregation website, as well as work with the administration and the paper to issue press releases and update folks, through public meetings, through the city website and social media, to ensure that they understand what's going to be occurring. In this particular case, the outcome could have been that it was truly seamless if the current energy supplier won the low bid, but in this case there will be a new supplier, so we will have to make sure that people understand what's happening. And as always, the terms and conditions are the same in that folks can opt out if they choose to do so, and move back to an alternate supplier or the National Grid basic rate, if that's the way they continue to kind of review and look for either the lowest price that's available or want to change their options for some reason. So I'll take a quick pause there and answer any questions you might have before I move on.
Greg, I'm curious about one thing. Have you got any sense of whether our offering is better than, or at least competitive with, some of the energy initiatives from the other private sellers that that deluge our constituents with mail? Are we offering a good package compared to those?
I think by the participation rate, I think we're doing pretty well. I haven't looked very closely at a lot of the competitive agreements. They generally, also do things like introductory rates and, change over time. They might be shorter term. So I think there's a lot of variability. And, that's if somebody, receives information, we're probably not in the position to really tell them, which is necessarily better, particularly if there are variables. But I think to the extent that, a lot of people have stayed within the program, and, there's all sorts of conditions that can be in any supplier's agreement in terms of, whether there's an escalation over an introductory period, what the term of the agreement is, whether there's a penalty to leave the program. So I can't quite tell you, but maybe that's something at a future date. We can also look to the Good Energy folks to maybe respond to a little bit how they feel the competitiveness of it.
Yeah.
I could add something to that. Because I've worked for Action Energy programs for, I don't know, what is it, 13, 14 years now. Especially the people coming into fuel assistance, that people would have questions. Is this a good deal? Is that a good deal? There were so many bad deals, and we couldn't say specifically, you can't do that. But even from authorities beyond us, like the National Consumer Law Center, the advice really is be very, very careful. And there were some horror stories, you know, oh, well, you can get out of this, but it costs you $1,200, and these are low-income people. So
Yeah,
just as a general thing, it's really not a good idea. I mean, obviously, we can't say absolutely not, but it's just, boy, let the buyer beware, because there's a lot of scams.
look what happened in Texas this winter. And so,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
you know, a lot of those same kind of,
switch.
switch programs were what people got into there and had real trouble, getting out of them and cost them a lot of money. So there is a real buyer beware element in all of those things.
Yes. Well, thank you all for contributing a thought to that. Onward, Greg.
First, I'll unmute myself.
Greg.
The next thing I'll move on to is demand response. And I'm not sure how familiar folks are with this program. I know that it's been discussed probably, over a couple of years. But there are programs, as this is a slide from C-Power Energy Management, which is one of the firms that facilitates the development of demand response programs in municipalities and also, really energy users in general. The programs that pay organizations to reduce energy load during times of grid stress or high energy price. And it provides financial incentive to the users that enroll in the program in a variety of ways, but generally in a kind of a revenue share or a payback to the entity that participates in the program. So this little graphic is essentially what happens is there are some very, very known predicted dates where the grid expects that there's going to be particularly high demand or high cost. And it is a voluntary program whereby you are given the notification of the timing of when you're supposed to respond by either powering down equipment or shifting to an unoccupied mode if you have an energy management system in a facility. And so that reduces the demand in that area. And they either meter that depending upon the type of program, or just know from what you're proposing to do through your typical billing with National Grid. They can see that delta of what's occurred based on your kind of powering down. And then at the end of the period, you return to normal operations, and they assess a value to that participation, and the city would receive funding. So there are a couple of different programs that are out there, or different types of ways that demand response is offered. There's one called Active Demand Capacity Resource. This is one that's a little bit more time sensitive. You can see kind of as you go across. It's something that they're looking for a particular moment where they're feeling like it's going to be a higher priority. The time periods are typically around a portion of a day, and that's administered through ISO New England. So in those particular cases, there's a specific metering that's set up for facilities, and again, they look at that delta during these time frames. So essentially, an event occurs, they will dispatch to specific employees in a municipality who will be responsible for the response to power down those facilities or equipment that's of peak usage, to try to kind of smooth out the issue with the potential supply at that time. And then there's another called peak demand management. That's more of a situation where you might kind of shift between using an energy management system between occupied and unoccupied. Again, at certain times, there's usually a little bit more lead time. And that's one of the programs that's administered through C-Power. So we are currently enrolled to potentially have actions taken at the water pollution control facility and the water treatment plant. And those are those that would fall under the program where they will be metered. Certain equipment would be powered down for that period of time. Obviously, there was a detailed assessment of what can be powered without any compromised operations. And then at the high school, O'Malley Innovation Middle School and West Parish, it would be done through EMS controls. So that's a real positive that we've spent a fair amount of time over the past couple of years investing in the energy management systems within the high school and the O'Malley Middle School, so that we can be prepared for those set points to basically just kind of flip one switch to be able to provide for what the program is looking to do in terms of conserving energy during those periods. So again, it's voluntary. We're notified of the opportunities. We respond. We're rewarded. And this comes after a fairly detailed evaluation by CPower of our energy billing or our usage to really figure out which facilities are really the ones that are prime. So these 5 will be are currently enrolled. There's a little bit time spent right now working on the metering aspects of the 2 treatment facilities, but the schools are essentially ready to go because they already had the EMS control systems in place. So I can try to answer any questions. I've been a little bit more tangentially involved. We could certainly try to bring some of the folks that were more in the design of the program potentially at a future meeting, but that's a pretty brief summary of what's going on.
So Greg, I have one question. This is John. With regard to the water pollution control facility and the water treatment plant, my recollection, and maybe that's since changed, but wasn't Veolia contractually obligated to, kind of manage their own utility bills for this? And then, the contract incentivize them to upgrade stuff to be more efficient at these facilities? And how does is that still the case? And if so, what's the sort of contractual interface there between them and the city of Gloucester in terms of who gets the benefit of this demand response program?
It's a good question. I mean, I know that there's currently, specific capital planning around, equipment upgrades, efficiency. Yeah. That's kind of part of, a little bit separate. But in terms of how that, the billing aspect and that type of thing, and how this gets administered operationally, I'd have to understand better from, the environmental engineer that works with Veolia as to how that's going to roll out.
I'm just curious. I mean, when Veolia took over from Weston and Sampson, I that was back in the day when Suzanne Egan was the town council, and I kind of helped her write the contract, with Veolia to have them on the hook for their own utility costs for that. I'm just wondering if that's still the case, and if that in any way gets in the way of this. But that's probably a side conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to do some follow up on that.
Okay.
That's interesting. Greg, I'm just curious, are there any other buildings, municipal buildings, that are being considered as possible candidates for demand response, or have you've picked the low-hanging fruit already?
This is based on the analysis that CPower provided to us in terms of, the benefit, and really, again, they're kind of no surprise here. They're focused on some of our largest facilities. Yeah. And that have the largest accounts in terms of billing. So, I think there's probably some diminishing return. There's a certain amount of investment for either metering a facility and then also monitoring. And I think, they try to pick the best candidates that are going to kind of help meet their goal. And then it also will, have a significant enough financial incentive for us to, kind of engage, because there's an operational, cost as well to respond to this. If you really, had a long list of things, you'd be running around flipping switches for a day and a half to try to catch up to it. So I think that's based on their recommendation of what the candidate sites would be best to participate. And, we've basically taken everything that they suggested would make sense. And I'm just noticing the typo. That's 3-7.
Oh, I hadn't
Things that
noticed.
on the fly.
Yeah, I had a question. Is because we looked at this a few years ago and it was an MAPC program. Now, is this the same as the MAPC program?
So this is kind of a collaboration between National Grid and C-Power. So
Okay,
there's two slightly different programs. So I'm not sure how that one maybe more of a legacy program and sunset, but this is what was brought to us through National Grid and kind of partnered up with C-Power.
I see. Okay.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Oh, next
So-
topic would be the CARP grant.
And so I will turn it over to Gemma for a little bit. We worked very closely with a couple of folks from MAPC to put together this application, which I think is pretty comprehensive and I think was shared with the members. But I can let her kind of speak to it because she also did a lot of the heavy lifting on this one.
Wonderful.
Can you actually go to the next slide, Greg? Yes, so basically we submitted an application for almost $70,000 in state funding from the MVP program. And then the city also with that made a commitment of about $30,000 on May 8th. You've all had a chance to look at the scope, but kind of broadly it included a pretty robust data collection process, working with MAPC and kind of leveraging, their expertise in that area, as well as a really broad community engagement process. We included things like a youth internship, which is funded in the grant to kind of support that. And then obviously culminating in, identifying targets, identifying action items, and kind of setting a roadmap that's comprehensive, around all of the things that you work on all the time. So we expect that we'll find out about the award in July. And then the first task would be the data collection piece, which would be working with MAPC, and that would be September, October. This table is just kind of a little snippet of what the scope of work was. But I would definitely, recommend if you want to dig a little deeper, looking at the scope of work, and I'm also happy to answer any questions.
I just have a quick comment, which is I think it's so exciting that community development has decided to do this plan. And the idea that we're going to define both a target for the reduction in carbon footprint and a date that might happen is bold and very determined. And I am really proud to be a resident of the city that has such a wonderful community development department. If we don't get the funding, is there a game plan for another way to preserve that planning process and go ahead with it anyway?
I mean, I think, we have a really good sense of the, kind of the value of the project, not, both sides of the coin in terms of what it can provide, but also what it takes. We would have to kind of look at alternative ways of trying to fund it. In that city match is also a fair amount of staff time to support that effort. So it's not just a purely cash match. And we recognize that there's data sources that we have, that we're going to have to, we would have to work with MAPC to really kind of round things out. So, there's by no means is this something you can just kind of outsource. There's definitely a lot of local information and knowledge that needs to be infused into the process. And, the goal setting it's a community discussion in terms of, what people prioritize, what people are willing to do, and how we can kind of get to those targets. So, the hope is it's a strong application. We actually have we've received one MVP action grant. This is their, I think, their fourth round, if I'm not mistaken. So, I think, one of the things that we kind of looked at fairly closely was whether or not this was a good fit for the program. We certainly advocate that, there's the two sides of the equation. There's the emissions side as well as the mitigation and adaptation side. And we've done, a lot in both of those areas. There's no action that I think we've taken that, we're not confident that it's been a positive step and has had a positive result in terms of the renewable projects, the energy reduction, and mitigation projects, specifically with sea level rise and that type of thing. But this is just another opportunity to try to put something a little bit more comprehensive in place. This has a very heavy stakeholder engagement aspect to it to really try to, really reach as many people as we can to make sure that, they're aware of the, the issues, and then also that they have some, commitment and buy-in to, how to get to those results. So, we are in a little bit of a wait and see position. I think, it's something important, and we would have to, either seek other funding sources or, there are opportunities, and we use them, annually to work with MAPC on DLTA projects. They have district local technical assistance. And, the fact that we've partnered with them on this grant, it's kind of a turnkey, application that could be applied. We would look to, probably something along those lines. Maybe reevaluate scope a little bit to figure out, how it could be adjusted to try to minimize cost. But, I think it's worthwhile to pursue.
Can Green Communities money be used on this plan?
They are very much about, physical construction projects that result in a return on investment in terms of energy reduction. So I don't think it's something, there are other opportunities for planning like this type. So again, we saw this as really a good fit. The timing was right. We're hopeful that, we'll get a positive response. But there are other opportunities out there that we could also look at.
Thank you. Okay. Then the Green Communities Program reporting and funding.
Sure. So the last thing, this is, just a quick update, because I know we also have some other attendees that are going to be speaking. So we're just about to close out the fiscal year on June 30th, and that's the time horizon where we start to collect all the data for looking at how we performed over the last year, which will be an interesting one for sure. I'm sure, I think, I don't know if we're all going to get kind of a pass in terms of whatever your final analysis in terms of where you are in your reduction strategy. But that's the point where we start to say, okay, we close the books on that year and we start to collect all the data for the annual reporting, which is usually needed in advance of the next grant round. So there's been no announcement yet of when those will be due, but we're certainly going to be in a position to get that done so that it's ready to be submitted if it's a qualifying piece to be able to apply for the next competitive grant round for projects. Again, as I mentioned before, we have a really good relationship right now with our National Grid rep. They have done some additional auditing work on opportunities. In particular, if you look at, Mass Energy Insight is the program that we use to track and monitor the energy usage in the building. It all kind of gets reduced down to a common denominator to kind of gauge the efficiency of different buildings. And we know that the ones that have the greatest opportunity are most of our projects have been focused around the high school and the middle school, and also potentially the rink. And we've also had some evaluation of City Hall as well. So we will be working with National Grid over the next probably month and a half to kind of sort through some of their evaluation as to what they see as some of the projects that could have the greatest return. We kind of cross-reference that again against what Public Works knows is our troubled areas. So if there's efficiencies for a project that not only, kind of takes something off the table in terms of a project that's needed by Public Works and also has an adder of being able to infuse some funding in from an efficiency perspective, then we'll go through that prioritization process and identify what will match up with the grant. And it's obviously the audit will say, here's what you need to do. Am I on screen? I think I'm on screen. Big long list. And the funding that's available is dwindling from the Green Communities program. So that's always the challenge. So, typically what happens is, we take off, kind of bite-sized chunks that can be applied to at usually a cap of around $100,000 or $200,000 per project. And again, hopefully that will fold into, a larger project that's also trying to satisfy some other goals.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. Greg and Gemma, do you have any further comments you want to make, or shall we move on to, although I don't see Byron Woodman's face on my screen yet. Greg, can you
Yeah,
tell us?
I think he had said that he was going to back off. There
There he is. I see him. Okay. So are we ready to welcome Byron? We are. Good. Hi, Byron. Is your mic turned on? Nope, you're mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
very good.
Excellent. Okay.
So
I'm connected by my phone and the screen, so I wasn't sure which mic was active. So this is good.
very good.
I prepared a presentation. I don't know if I can I share my screen or share the proposal from here, the presentation?
You should be able to. Yep.
Okay, let me let's see if I can just select the right screen here. All right.
It's working.
Are you able to see this?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So I guess, first of all, thank you very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. And I know that there's some time sensitivity to folks needing to hang off here at 6:30. So I will be kind of very mindful of the time. Over the last, this project or this, presentation tonight is probably a confluence of many different events dating back a number of years. And looking at the initial, energy overview that Gloucester received in the form of the Meister Report in 2015, combining that with what we now know about the SMART program and the Massachusetts solar incentives, combined with the roof areas and potential for solar at Gloucester, as well as your current energy acquisition, there are a number of key variables here that we're going through. And so during this presentation, what I'd love to do is, if I could, is kind of give you a little overview or context for where we are and what the potential opportunities are, but then focus on potential next steps. We're really in a unique time now where the policy is shaping up, where we'll be able to start to move forward. Gloucester already obviously has its net metering agreement. So part of the exercise will be taking a look at what future solar opportunities are and how they may dovetail with your existing net metering agreement as well too. So that's sort of my preamble or my kind of context. Feel free to ask questions throughout if you have questions, and I'll do a start now if that's okay with everybody.
Yes.
Okay. So in the agenda, a little bit about the Power Options Program and Select Energy, a little bit about the Massachusetts Smart Incentive Program, which I'm anticipating that the committee may be somewhat familiar with already. An overview in terms of Gloucester's energy consumption and potential for generation, and then the action items and next steps. So Power Options is an aggregation program. It's a nonprofit that was created by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to provide municipalities and nonprofits with the opportunity to benefit from energy aggregations. And through that, they provide energy, natural gas, electricity, and one of their offerings is the solar program. And Select was selected as Power Options vendor of choice a few years ago to bring solar to the market. And through this program, one of the benefits of it is because we were procured through the Power Options program, it enables municipalities to be able to advance with solar without the competitive bid process. So essentially, we're able to work directly with towns in terms of offering power purchase agreements and site leases. The agreements that we offer are audited through Power Options, and all of our pricing is also audited through the Power Options program. Select was founded in 2009 and is headquartered in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. We develop and finance and design and build projects. We also own and operate projects which we build. Have about 70 employees. We've built close to 550 or maybe a little over 550 commercial projects in the Commonwealth. And we manage our team that oversees operation and management of facilities have a portfolio of about 650 projects currently under management throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. We have established and successfully built about 80 or more power purchase agreements for public and nonprofit customers, and we are also DCAM certified. And so it's in this capacity that we're able to bring a fairly unique offering to municipalities where we will finance a system. There's no upfront cost or maintenance responsibilities. In this case, for the city of Gloucester, we will install it. The power purchase agreements are 20 years in length for rooftop projects and 25 years for parking canopies. We will offer a fixed PPA rate for the projects that we built for the entire term. And then again, the actual power purchase agreement is audited and overseen through the Power Options program. And then Gloucester can work with Power Options as an advisor if you have questions about it, or want additional eyes on the projects that we're looking at. And they work very actively with all their members on these projects.
I have a question before you go on. The Power
Sure.
Options, just so I understand, is that a state agency then?
It was created through Mass General Law. It actually operates as a separate nonprofit at this point.
Okay, but so they've chosen Select as the sole source for the selected supplier of the solar, right?
That's correct.
That's how we avoid the competitive bid process. And Power Options is Power Options the final party then to, in other words, review the scope of work, approve the savings calculations, and then approve everything along the way?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
That is correct.
And who audits Power Options? Anybody?
Power Options works directly with the Commonwealth, and I can follow up with additional information. I know they work closely with DOER. I know they work closely with the Commonwealth in terms of the actual audit of Power Options. I haven't been asked that before. That's a good question, and I can find out.
They at one point, and I think they still are part of the Mass HEFA, the Health and Education Facilities Authority. And so, you know, it's this big sort of uber nonprofit in the state that represents all of the healthcare, education, nonprofit, you know, and now some municipal entities. And so HEFA, Mass HEFA is quasi-state, and they have bonding authority. And you know, I think that's how a lot of this stuff gets financed.
And
John,
it
what
is,
does HEFA stand for?
Health and Educational Facilities Authority.
Thank you.
Brian, do you want to confirm that for us, or?
yes, I will.
All right, thank you.
Very good.
So I think we covered this. In terms of, you know, one of the outstanding questions has to do with balancing. There's certainly an opportunity for solar from an area and building perspective. There are questions in terms of the net metering credits. So obviously the city has a large net metering agreement from the wind turbines that provides probably about 8.5 million kilowatt hours per year. The Meister report indicated at the time that it was done that the city annual usage was around 10 million kilowatt hours or 10,000 megawatt hours per year, which would indicate that the city would have the capacity to purchase an additional 1,500 megawatt hours or 1.5 million kilowatt hours, which loosely ties to the amount of available space there is for additional solar generation. That said, and I'm encouraging us, and I'll actually pull up another spreadsheet here, if I may, because from the data that Greg provided earlier, hang on one second, let me see if I'm still sharing my screen here.
You're still sharing.
Good, okay, hold on. I put together a Google Doc, which enabled me to essentially take a look at each of the primary accounts. And I apologize if this looks small. Can people see the screen okay, these numbers?
The moment I still
Yeah.
have the energy usage versus net metering slide. So
Oh, okay.
your spreadsheet hasn't arrived yet.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can share it this way. Okay, did that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Now,
that's
sharing. Okay. So from data which Greg kindly provided, we looked at each of the facilities, each of the primary facilities, and Greg, feel free to weigh in on this if you'd like. But essentially, I went through each of the locations and then looked down and said, okay, how much energy, how much electricity does that, entity use on the course of a year? And this includes the metric tons. Annual usage in this case was 1.7 million kilowatt hours. And then I looked and said, okay, if we were able to put a 300 kW system on this roof, then it would equate to 21% of this building's overall usage. So that's just one example. But as we roll down through it, you'd see the total estimated production from these locations is about 1.7 million kilowatt hours. So really the exercise at this point is to, obviously we know what the PPA agreement is. We have two different numbers. One was from 2015 and one is more current in terms of the amount of energy used by Gloucester. And what I would propose that we do for next steps would be to do a deep dive on each one of those locations and forecast additional usage that may be coming online in Gloucester, and then do a comprehensive design for each of the locations and really narrow it down to maybe 4 or 5 key locations for solar that we think would add most value to Gloucester. And then be able to essentially submit those to interconnection and secure the incentive. So that's, I'm going to pull up the spreadsheet, the PowerPoint again. But those are really sort of the key next steps in terms of what we'd like to do with Gloucester. And maybe I'll just pause there and see if the team here has any questions before moving on to the next slides.
So Byron, I've got 2 minutes before I need to leave. So let me leave you with 2 comments. I think your first bullet under next steps is really important. There's got to be some, sort of clear definition of what Gloucester's electricity consumption is in excess of that 8.5 million kilowatt hours currently contracted for from the wind turbines. And so that needs to, and that'll drive, kind of what kind of solar there's technical potential for in terms of, city demand for that. And the other thing I think we really need to get a sense of before there's any more movement on this is whether there's appetite within the city administration to do the legwork, for these kinds of projects, because without the DPW on board, and the city planning office and stuff, a conversation with us is, kind of beside the point. And so I get the case that you're trying to make, but we also have to ensure that there's appetite within the city to want to take on projects of this scale and effort.
Understood.
And so with that, guys,
Understood.
I've got to run. I look forward to seeing some numbers from you, to kind of see, see where we're at with this as this gets more clear.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
John.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, John.
Bye.
Any other questions or comments before we
Yeah,
advance here a little bit more?
This is Linda. I have a question.
Sure.
Do you have a minimum project size?
It would be,
I mean, is it a megawatt or is it a half a megawatt?
no, it's not. I mean, we're working with several municipalities right now on new fire stations that they're working on, and those fire stations are probably 85 kW, so under 100 kW, which is a fairly small system. So
Right.
we can be flexible in terms of working on fire stations, police stations, DPW garages, all the way up to, multi-megawatt systems.
Okay. And Greg, maybe I thought under the Meister report, it mentions that we're actually contracted to purchase up to 11,000 megawatt hours per year.
Yeah,
correct?
so that was one of my first points that I was going to make is,
Okay.
it's nailing down a little bit of actual usage, I think is an important step, because that is kind of, we certainly haven't seen any years where the turbines have performed in such a way that they've gone even above, I don't think, even 9 million kilowatt hours. So, that's important, but we are committed to buy all of the energy, and there are additional incentives as it, if there's a real bumper crop year, the incentives shift where we get a greater revenue share as it goes above 9 and goes above 10. So that's something definitely to, and I was kind of, Linda, you're dead on in terms of, there's a certain amount of capacity there, in what project size, is understanding what the max is and what the minimum is that you kind of engage in the community. would be good to understand. So there's a few more things I think we've got to sort out. I appreciate, you taking this head on, because that's where a lot of discussions have begun and ended over the last few years since the Meister report, to kind of get at this, is there really, capacity for us to enter into another agreement where we would essentially, be committing to buying energy from two different systems. And at some point, we are in a unique situation with the turbine agreement, because we're not receiving credits to accounts, we're receiving payments. So it's a little bit easier to manage on the utility side as well as our side. So that's just a factor to try to figure out how to potentially bring on more renewable. I think it's definitely worth exploring. We know we have a lot of roof space. There's definitely facilities in there that are targeted to no longer be online in the near future. So, obviously we wouldn't go too far in any evaluation of anything that's obsolete. And we also have, some potential for new facilities looking at solar options as well. So there might be an option there to be a part of kind of the suite of facilities that are considered. So I think it's a great first discussion.
One question too, and part of doing the due diligence is also understanding just the maintenance cycle for the roofs, or when, the age of the existing roofs, because that would tie into it as well. There is a focus on net metering, I guess, as a fallback plan if Gloucester itself didn't have an appetite to use the energy. There's always an option to potentially lease the roofs, which could also happen through this program, where we could consider that as well too. So I think as we drill down and understand what the appetite is for new on-site generation, and then the follow-up to that would be what the lease options are, or what the PPA options are, I guess, which road.
I guess if I'm going to chime in, I guess now that you mentioned the PPA options, I know we're a long way away from any of this, but are any of your PPA options involve the city being able to get some part of ownership over the system at the end of the period, at the end of the 20-year period? Because ultimately, if we're looking for long-term resilience,
Yep.
at the end of that 20-year period, it's kind of just like a Band-Aid. If you have to pick it up.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. The PPAs include a few options throughout the term for the city to actually purchase and own the equipment itself, including at the end of the contract. So that would certainly be possible. And for a 20-year PPA, we're expecting the system to be operational and producing well past that 20-year mark. So that's a good point.
Thanks.
I've got a question, and that is, and this is partly for Greg too. As the message is going out that, all of the electricity consumers on Earth need to start moving towards more electrification and phasing out their fossil fuel use. Do you anticipate that there will be a growth in the city's electrical consumption because of moving more towards electrification? And part two, is there a possibility that we also might start wanting to generate electricity in order to create storage for resiliency? So that, if we had a microgrid that would help support municipal operations during a grid outage, and the hospital and the emergency centers and police and fire and public works would all be served by battery backup, would it make sense to have some municipal roofs with solar sitting on them, especially to create that stored electricity?
I mean, I think that's certainly, one of the things that's come over, since we entered into the turbine agreement. Again, a lot of the potential production as well as the estimate of consumption, they were exactly that. I mean, I think The turbine is doing pretty well of hitting the target of around, I think the 85% confidence interval, which was kind of expected in terms of hitting each year at around 8.5 plus or minus. And again, our fluctuation in electrical usage can be, there's some swings there as well. We are going through a situation right now where we're, considering changing in facilities, retiring facilities, building new facilities. So, there's some fluctuation there as well. Having generation when we most need it is certainly that's, something that's got to be considered, whether it's diesel generators or battery storage. And so that's also some of, I think, how solar has been thought about as well, in terms of not just, pursuing renewable projects, but also thinking about it in terms of how it can potentially supply energy when it's most needed. So, that's a little bit different in terms of, looking at, the cost of energy, how it's generated, but, that element of trying to kind of similar to demand response, but in the opposite direction of when there's no energy, having something available. So I think it's, how do we think about renewables and, whether or not it can be a part of redundancy and resiliency is a whole nother piece that has to be considered.
Thank you.
Greg, are you familiar with the Sterling, Massachusetts municipal plant? I'll send over a video. They're a municipal light plant, so us being under National Grid territory, it's not really an option. But I was going to say, Candace, that's kind of, what they do is they have a giant battery for their entire town, a battery system and a solar array. And in times of outage, they will power the first responders, the police and fire, using that array and battery. And for, in the middle of the night, they can charge those batteries from ISO in New England, get a low rate, and then be able to dispatch that to their constituents at a lower rate. So that's kind of what you're talking about a little bit, Greg, and what you're talking about, Candace. Unfortunately, again, that is because the city operates their light plant. And being under National Grid, we don't really have a lot of those options because we can't play the financial payback things that are for a battery. So in a lot of these cases, a battery backup at the fire station, there's no financial payback for it, unfortunately, because it's just as in comparison to maintenance for a generator, which right now generators are much less expensive. Right. So without that kind of financial payback, it's a little tricky, and I'm not saying that Gloucester should take in its own utility because that would be a whole department, but that is the way to kind of, afford these things and get a financial payback for these things.
Interesting.
I'll send that a video about Sterling, Massachusetts. Again, it's just an interesting little thing.
Sounds very interesting. Is that something you could share with all of us, Sam?
Yeah, I'll put it on the email thread.
Great, thank you.
I guess just wanted to get the, I think we've gone through the majority of the presentation. There's more action items in terms of once we identify the sites, the type of due diligence that we would be doing to actually file for interconnection and be able to build the site. But I guess the primary question I have is what's going to be most helpful to the committee at this point in terms of next steps? Obviously we can drill down on the demand. We can confirm feasibility for the specific roofs, but what, in terms of understanding Gloucester's appetite for solar, what's going to be most helpful for the committee, I guess?
And Greg, you're part of the answer to that too, because we are somewhat
sure.
guided by what you're.
Candace and I had been, speaking about this probably over a few months now, while we've kind of not completely hibernated, but less activity. And, to see this kind of in one place in terms of how it operates, how the two entities function in terms of bringing the projects forward. I think it's something that we have to work with, setting up a meeting with Public Works. We can certainly go through, if you could provide the slide presentation as well in terms of your analysis, or actually, sorry, maybe the spreadsheet. And, we can certainly pretty quickly sift through, sites that are more candidate than others. And start to, kind of hone in on that, what's the size of a project that makes sense. Kind of add in some of those variables about useful life of structure, of roof, last replacement, to really get a handle on where the potential is. And then I think we have to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the PPA agreement and our capacity, essentially. And maybe discuss,
Sure.
like you said, more of those options of whether or not this is a PPA or a lease, and what the upside and the benefit is to the city.
Okay. All
One
right. Well,
more quick
that's great.
One more quick question for Byron before he goes, which is almost immediately. Byron, if we did create some sort of a resilience microgrid in effect that would store energy for use when the grid was down, would we have to, how would we wire that? In other words, it's an alternative to grid electricity. Do you have to set up your own wires essentially to carry the stored energy to the DPW building, the hospital, the police station, the fire station? How do you get the energy there?
It would be a what's called a distributed generation model. So each location would have its own essential microgrid, and there is the equation of in terms of Gloucester's driver, is it to optimize savings or is it to optimize resiliency, or a combination of both? Because resiliency is good, but also it may be more expensive or diminish the actual savings from the potential maximum savings that you get from solar. So that would be part of the conversation that we need to have kind of going forward. So it might be one or two sites that would have resiliency, and then maybe the others would just be used to optimize the savings. And so it's part of how the city would plan to use different facilities in the time of an emergency, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, Candace, you would basically only have battery backup power where the battery is, unless we ran our own electric lines, which
Right.
again probably wouldn't be feasible.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. It might even be illegal. I seem to remember John Muskell saying that utilities have some exclusive rights.
Yeah. So it'd be kind of like, again, I'll share this video again. We kind of our hands are kind of tied, being in the monopoly of National Grid with a lot of these things. But yeah, I think that the battery backup, it would be great to have a solar and battery, system at, the police station, and like I said, first responders, hospital, fire department. But again, there's no financial payback for that right now, unfortunately.
Excellent. Well, Byron, I think you have to go, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. And Candace, perhaps we can circle up tomorrow or the next day and figure out what kind of deliverables would be helpful that I could provide to the city or next steps.
Yeah, and if you could begin with the spreadsheet and the PowerPoint, that would be hugely helpful to use that internally and set something up.
Terrific.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
You.
So we had one more item on our agenda, which was, to determine if there was any change relative to the CPACE program, the commercially assessed efficiency, essentially. And Linda Saunders, you've been our expert on CPACE, so maybe I'm partly turning to you as well as Greg. Have any of you heard anything about, how as a community we can encourage our businesses to start taking advantage of this way to fund efficiency projects?
This is Linda.
Hi.
I haven't followed up with anybody yet. I did sit in on I guess it was a Zoom call with, I think it was Justino and his spouse and somebody else. I don't recall exactly, couldn't find my notes on it. And in that call, they briefly talked about the PACE program, but I haven't followed up with the chamber or anybody else yet.
Okay. We may want to make that a summer sort of to do for ourselves. Greg, have you seen any rumblings from your?
No,
vetting?
no, I think, back, did that come out of the March meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
I did a little dot connecting, and I think we were on an email chain for a little bit, and I didn't see any real movement.
Mhm.
But hopefully, I think as you can see, there's a lot more activity. People are starting to interface a little bit more. So hopefully
Exactly.
that's
It
something we
just-
can get off the ground.
Part of it was timing, yeah.
Yep.
And
So
Greg,
I will put that on as it's due to kind of circle back
okay.
with that same group, Linda, and maybe we can get some traction.
Right.
Greg, you had commented that, with the pandemic, there were a lot of businesses that were really hurting and that this wasn't a time that you were going to see them diving in to do efficiency projects. They're just trying to keep their nostrils above.
Yeah,
water.
I mean, I think, anybody that was involved in some way in supply chain, there were a lot of issues there. We certainly continued to see, development and particularly, residential development didn't really slow down. I don't remember the final revenue numbers from a building permit perspective, but the activity level never really slowed down. But I think from a business perspective about making some of those decisions, I just don't know, where that fell as people were just trying to figure out if they were even going to be going back to their facility
Yeah,
from month to month.
right. All right. Well, does anyone have any other topics that they would like to touch on before we adjourn?
So Candace, I just noticed you do have an attendee with a raised hand. I didn't know if you wanted to take
Oh.
any public questions, but
Sure. This is all new on me, Greg. How do we let that attend? Do I just click
So
on the
I-
little hand?
I can allow. So it looks like Ellen Lehman has her hand raised, and I will allow her to speak. And then
Okay,
you can
terrific, thank you.
you can moderate.
Okay, great.
Great. You can hear me now, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Ellen.
So first of all, hi, I want to thank you all for doing what you do as volunteers concerned about our environment. Moving forward with the 2050 net zero, I just have questions and concerns concerning a volunteer group taking the responsibility of all of this. And you all work so hard and trying to understand this, but I do, again, have concern that we have a lot to do and we need the city to be on board even more than they are. Greg, you talked about all the new building and the permits and all that. Well, all these new buildings, a lot of people are still using gas in their buildings. Is there any way the city is having control as far as requiring people follow the net zero stretch code when they're building these new buildings, going for permits or whatever, because we're gonna have to backtrack at some point to work with them.
So we have adopted the most stringent energy standards. There have been a number of proposals to further refine and strengthen the energy standards. But as of now, we don't have something that's in addition to what's required by the state building code. Again, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not there will be anything further that will start to push towards net zero building requirements. I can tell you from public project perspectives, they are typically centered around the LEED program. So there is a fair amount of movement towards either greater efficiency and also looking at alternative types of energy that are going to be utilized. But it's certainly something on the radar. There's no specific proposal right now as a mandate.
Okay, thank you, because there is so much building going on and so much development that to use that permitting process to trade for environmentally friendly ways to build would be a really good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Sure.
All right. So any other members have comments or thoughts that they want to put out? Can we talk a little bit for one moment about next meeting dates? How would people feel about saying the fourth Wednesday of every month is going to be a CEC meeting unless we, decide on a a cancellation during the summer or at Christmas or something like that. Greg, would the fourth Thursday of each month work for you and Gemma? Excuse me, Wednesday. Wednesdays, what, because John Moskowitz said Wednesdays are better for him.
Yeah, I would probably try to suggest not a second or fourth, just because that's typically it's yeah. There's to the extent that there have been some committees that have been meeting and some committees that haven't. Our typical support is city council, planning and development, and planning board. And planning and development and planning board meet typically on second and fourth Wednesday and Thursdays. We are also supporting the open space committee that was going to have potentially a meeting earlier today that did not, and that's why we slid to 5:30. I'd love to try to kind of pick a good standard time for you. I guess it's obviously up to you as the chair. It's just a matter of whether one or both of us will be able to attend.
How would third Wednesdays of each month work for you?
That would certainly probably at least remove the potential conflict with city council subcommittees. And then open space, we've generally been meeting a little bit earlier, so that might be a good placeholder.
Okay. Members of the CEC, how do you feel about third Wednesday of each month as sort of a pattern that we'll try to stick to?
Fine.
That works for me. I do have to run. I'm already on borrowed time. I just want to
Okay.
thank you for the solar
Thank you,
stuff,
Sam.
but, just let me know.
Actually, I just got that backwards.
Up.
The planning board is first and third, and so
I'm gonna go.
Okay, bye, Sam.
Yeah, but pick your date, and we'll try to accommodate.
Okay.
It's for us.
I think-
It's a little crazy. I mean, it's like there's meetings every week, every night. So
Greg, it's you two of the priority period. For one or both of you to be
And
at our meetings, that
I don't
that's our
know
priority.
if Gemma could cover some of the meetings when Greg has to go to other ones,
Yeah.
or whether you both have to appear. I'm sure you both have to appear at the planning board. I mean, and
Yeah.
maybe some of the others. But so does that mean that the fourth Wednesday might be more promising?
It could.
Okay. Well, maybe shall we say fourth Wednesday of the month, if people can try to save the fourth Wednesday of each month for a CEC meeting, and we'll probably have a couple of months where we won't meet, such as the Thanksgiving Christmas stretch, or maybe August or something. Although this year, since we haven't had a chance to meet much, we may want to meet every month. But if it's okay with everyone, I will just say that I will schedule our next meeting for the fourth Wednesday of July, and we'll proceed accordingly from there.
And Candace, I'm also noticing Susan Hoag has her hand raised in the attendee list.
Oh, okay.
So I'll allow
Greg, can
her
you-
to speak.
Can you
Yep.
let her speak?
Yep.
Thank you.
Susan, you should be able to speak.
I'd just like to bring up two things. First of all, I was at a meeting where I asked about CPACE throughout the state, and no other city who has adopted it has actually got a case, somebody who applied for it. So Gloucester isn't so far behind everybody. I found that extraordinary.
Hmm.
Second thing that really came up that really kind of bothered me was, you're all aware of community solar subscriptions. There's community solar that the state of Massachusetts has okayed and demanded that they give at least a 10% reduction over National Grid. And I think that we need to somehow let people know that this is legitimate as opposed to all the other ones who aren't legitimate. Maura Healy, wrote a great big article about all the ripoffs they had. But this one is under the SMART program, and there are several, 4 or 5 companies in Massachusetts. And there's one that's out now, NEXAMP, that has a 12% reduction, no fees, no contracts, no nothing, no check on your finances. It's really made for low-income families. And it does not, as far as I can understand, I don't really understand it, but they told me that it does not impact the municipal aggregation group that you need, because all they do is give credits back on your national grid bill. So I don't know. I think it's just something that instead of saying, no, there aren't other ways of people getting 100% renewables, that there is this way. And I'm sure that you all can check it out and see if what I'm saying is correct. But that's the way I've been watching this for a number of years. And this is the best one that's come out now, with no contract, no money down, no anything.
Now, when you say, Susan, community solar, does the municipality have to get involved, or is it a privately?
These are companies that go out and build these great big solar farms out in the western part of the country. And then they get people to subscribe to them before they build them. So sometimes you might have to wait until they get enough subscribers to make it worthwhile. They're putting up another. But this is regulated by the SMART program. So it's not something that you need to be afraid of, as I understand. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Very
I
good.
just wanted to respond, Susan. I didn't say that there weren't other options, and I think I definitely made it clear that, what we have in terms of aggregation is also an option. There are definitely, it depends on what somebody's goals are, whether they're, financially motivated, whether they're renewable energy motivated. There are other options, but it's just, we're not in the business of trying to, kind of compare and contrast all the options that are out there. But clearly, as you know, from that reporting from Healy's office as well, there's also been a lot of, really predatory options that have been put in front of people that are unfortunate, that they only find out until they want to get out.
They call me up all the time, bunches of them.
The issue is that this is a chance for low income, for people who can't afford the extra money, to go 100% with the Gloucester program to get 100%. That's the only, it's a cost saving to go 100%. And it's kind of regulated by the government. So, okay, thank you.
What Susan said just reminded me of a sort of a maybe harebrained idea that I've had for a while, which is, could an approach like what Susan just described make it possible for some kind of a community solar project that was directed to offer cheap 100% renewable electricity through the EDIC, which is the Economic Development and Industrial Commission, to businesses in Gloucester, to make it a really great place to locate. That if you move to Gloucester, you'll have a cheaper energy for your processes, and it's all renewable. And I just wonder whether something like that would be something that we could suggest to our own EDIC as an option that might be of interest, and it would contribute to the city's reducing the city's carbon footprint. Greg, is that harebrained?
You just suggested it. I'm not saying it's harebrained. There's lots of factors, obviously. Where's the site? Who manages it? And how does that, how do you kind of set up that subscription? If there was an opportunity for community solar, what's the user group that you're trying to support? Business versus residential. So a lot of different options there. Again, I think there's a lot of things out there in terms of solar. Municipal rooftop approach, ground mounted community, whether you just lease a site, and how that all kind of plays with what the city's involvement can be in because of our contractual agreements that we have in place already with PPA agreements. So by no means a simple answer, but it certainly sounds like a anything that we can be doing that can make it, more efficient for existing businesses as well as attracting businesses, is certainly something that's kind of up the alley of the EDIC as well.
Yeah, and Candace, it's
Mhm.
Linda. I think that's a question you could actually ask Brian, who we just talked to. They do commercial projects.
Mhm.
And they probably can do, exactly what you're talking about, and setting up a solar array for the off takers being some type of community solar project or CNI, as
Yeah, good idea, Linda. And it might be
And-
worth chatting with the EDIC at some point, just to, see if they have any interest in this sort of a thing.
Yeah, I would first run it by Brian and just pick
Yep.
his brain on it.
Okay.
And then back to what Susan brought up, I don't know if she's still on the call.
Yeah,
but-
I'm still
Yeah,
here.
Susan, because I did look at two different, one was Blue Wave Energy, and I forget who the other was, which were all community solar programs. So I am kind of interested to see what this is all about with no contract, no strings attached, etc. I don't see how they could possibly raise the funds to develop a project without anything. So I'm curious, if you
yeah,
could
well-
send me some information on it, I'll look into it a little more.
Yeah, just look it up. I call them and talk to them because, it's too good to be true. I'm with you on that one, checking it out.
Yeah, so if you could just send me who the parties are that you know, and then I can check into it some more.
There is another one called Replay Power, and the Sierra Club of Massachusetts is advertising that one. So they're behind that solar
Okay.
community program. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, well, I think we're getting down to the adjournment moment.
You got one more raised hand,
Oh, whoops. All right.
and I'm going to allow Marcia Hart to speak.
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, Marcia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for all the work that you do, paid and not paid and volunteer. I just want to comment on the current conversation because before the aggregation happened, I had for years had a small company like that who offered me a better rate than National Grid that supplied 100% renewable energy. And I had to pay more than you would if you didn't have 100%, but it was a really good deal. I had no problems. I switched to the aggregate thinking, it was a way of supporting the city. And when I enrolled in that, I didn't realize for like the first year that for the first time in, 4 years, I was just in the basic plan and didn't understand that I needed to call them up in order to have a 100% agreement with them. So I don't have a lot of money, but it's a passionate issue. So I'm happy to pay that extra amount. I bet there are other people out there like me who care about renewable energy and the issues, but who don't understand that they're actually getting just basic National Grid with 5% renewable, and that they would be willing to do what I did, which was then to call them and enroll again in a renewable program. So I think you need to do a lot of outreach to try and up the number of people that are involved in this. A lot of communities are increasing the amount from the 5%, and I understand that we didn't do that. And I'm not saying that critically, but I think you could improve the numbers by doing outreach and trying to encourage more people to participate, and how important it is to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcia. And I just want to add that I had some conversations with folks from Good Energy and Greg at some point during the past year, in which Good Energy suggested that some outreach could be done to emphasize the 100% option. So I think that we're getting ready to to figure out how we spread the word more effectively on that.
The
Yeah,
Climate
and it-
Coalition would probably help.
Excuse me?
If you'd like the Climate Coalition to help, we could probably help you with that in some ways.
Yeah, Marcia, I think if you, I don't know if I couldn't recall if you were at the last meeting when Good Energy was present and made a presentation, because the contribution of the number of accounts that elected to go to 100% is pretty significant. So that was definitely part of the narrative of how can we better communicate what that option is. So again, we're kind of in a little bit of a waiting period now in terms of we're in the last. There's only going to be one more flip of rates as we go into the winter. But as we prepare in the fall for publicizing the new program, I think that's one of the targeted outreach that we have to do, and I think it would be good to work with the
I'm sure none of
the
you need
CACC.
more. None of you need more to do, so I'm also offering that perhaps we could be helpful and
Yeah.
Have a couple of people write an article in the newspaper about, it makes me feel really good to do that. And that might
That'd be
help
great.
other people.
That would be great.
Greg, could you explain? I was at that meeting and they were saying that one person who went to 100% was hugely very important, more than, I don't know.
No, so that what they were saying is, we have roughly about 10,000 plus or minus participants in the program, and then we have a very small and those, most of them are participating at the 5% level.
Right.
So it's really just kind of the ratio of, you have a smaller group that's producing at participating at 100%. So they actually are contributing a significant amount to the purchase of the RECs. When you look at that adder of how much more they're because they've chosen that and they're up that 3 or 4 cents, that's all being kind of contributing to the purchase of the REC, that they're actually having a pretty significant impact. So they're saying, look, you've got a really stable group of folks that are enrolled in the program, which is great. So how can you what are the things that you can do if your goal is to try to enhance the amount of renewables that are being supported? It's either through the potential of increasing the bulk, the 90% of folks that are in at 5% up to 10%. And we had that discussion about whether or not there needed to potentially be additional outreach. Why were people participating in the program? Was it because of, the stable, low cost energy compared to the grid rate? And that, one of the potential ways is to really try to really promote the opportunity for the 100% option, because that's where you're going to get a pretty large impact in terms of the REC purchase.
Is there a simple way of saying the impact of somebody going for 100%? I mean, if you're going to advertise it, there must be a simple way of stressing how important this 100%.
Yeah, I think we can go back to the 3 years worth of data that Good Energy presented, and they can kind of show what the impact of and I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I want to say it's in the range of hundreds, not thousands of accounts that are at that level and what they've contributed. So I think a graphic can be pretty compelling as to how much of a difference you're making as an individual user or a consumer to make that choice.
Can somebody help us make that graph? Because
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Don't we need to work with Good Energy? It's
Yes.
almost contractual that we do it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah, I
So
think
that's-
that will be
they
part
really
of the information dissemination as we kind of move
Right.
towards the next enrollment.
Great.
Yeah.
Good
Okay.
meeting, guys.
Are we wending our way towards adjournment here? Looks
So-
like no more hands.
Well, if anyone else leaves, you have to end. So there's only 4 CEC members left.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to have a motion to adjourn.
I move that
Somebody?
we adjourn.
Second?
I second it.
Okay, let's start with Linda in the upper left corner. Linda Saunders, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes.
I vote yes.
And I guess that's it.
I
And
vote
Deborah.
yes.
Oh,
There you go.
here you are. Deborah, your face has vanished.
Okay. So we
Very
will
good.
see you again potentially on the 4th Wednesday
Wednesday
of
of
July.
July.
Okay,
Have a
and
wonderful
welcome,
holiday.
Gemma.
And
Welcome
yes,
to
thank
you.
you both, Greg and Gemma, for
thank you.
guiding us through this.
Thank you,
Have a
everybody.
great night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Bye.